So, Andrew Huberman, you know him, the neuroscientist who's all about data-driven, mechanistic views of the brain. Well, he recently dropped a bombshell. He prays to a higher power, and he says it gives him a feeling of peace so profound, science just can't touch it. This has left a lot of people scratching their heads. Has the ultimate brain expert found something that science is actually missing? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into that, dissect his claims, and get to the bottom of this whole puzzle. So that's the real mystery here, isn't it? Why would a scientist who's famous for finding mechanisms inside the brain suddenly start looking for answers outside of it? So, is he right? Is there really some entity out there making things happen? Or is there a powerful scientific explanation for what he's feeling, hidden right inside his own field of neuroscience? Okay, so here's the core argument of this entire breakdown. The feeling Huberman is describing, it's absolutely real. Science even has a name for it: cognitive offloading. It's just that mental trick of handing a problem over to something or someone else. But as the slide points out, he makes a critical leap. He's taking a very real psychological mechanism and mistaking it for a theological truth. So we're going to argue that while his feeling is totally valid, his conclusion is based on a fundamental confusion between a brain process and an ancient myth. All right, so how did he get here? To really get it, we need to break down the logical traps he seems to have fallen into. Now, this isn't about invalidating his experience, not at all. It's about taking a hard look at the conclusions he's drawing from that experience. So let's dive into the first trap. So the first big one is something this analysis calls the user interface fallacy. What Huberman is basically saying is, hey, I feel relief when I pray, so the thing I'm praying to must be real. It's a classic mistake, really. He's confusing the icon on the screen with the code running underneath. He's assuming that just because the feeling is real, the metaphor he's using to trigger that feeling must be literally true. This desktop icon analogy just makes it crystal clear. When you drag a file on your computer to that little trash can icon, the file gets deleted, right? The process is totally real. There's code running, data is being erased, but there is no actual physical trash can inside your computer. The icon is just a useful metaphor, a user interface that kicks off the real code. So the argument here? God is the icon. It's the user-friendly button you press. The real magic, the code, is this psychological process of cognitive offloading. Huberman is basically describing how great the icon looks, as if it's a real object. Okay, next up, we've got the documentation trap. Huberman makes this appeal to history, right? He says that believing in an entity has always been a core part of being human. But here's the thing, this argument has a massive blind spot. It confuses the tiny, tiny sliver of recorded history with the vast, enormous timeline of all human history. And wow, this slide really hammers home just how big that blind spot is. Modern humans, we've been around for about 300,000 years. Writing, that was only invented about 6,000 years ago. That means everything we have written down, all the major religious texts, fits into just the last 2% of the human story. 2%. The stories that happened to be popular when writing was invented got frozen in time and called the truth. But for the other 98% of our time on this planet, our ancestors had who knows how many other beliefs. To look at that last 2% and call it the whole story, that's a huge historical bias. And that brings us right to the next big idea, the evolutionary fallacy. This is all about confusing our biological hardware with our cultural software. Here's the key takeaway. Our brains didn't evolve to believe in any specific God. Nope. They evolved with a kind of belief setting already turned on. Think of it like this. Our biological hardware, our brain, it comes with pre-installed features. We've got agency detection, which makes us see intention and purpose everywhere, and a super powerful drive for tribal conformity. These things helped our ancestors survive. So the stories we tell ourselves, whether it's a river spirit thousands of years ago, Yahweh a couple thousand years ago, or Huberman's entity today, they're just different apps, different software, running on the exact same ancient hardware. The urge to believe is biological. The specific religion is cultural. Huberman's confusing the latest app for the operating system itself. This is where it gets really interesting, the alien test. You got to ask yourself, why does a guy in 21st century America hear the Christian God? Why not Thor? Why not Zeus? Or, as the slide cheekily asks, why not aliens? The feeling of peace would be identical if you were in a culture that believed it came from a mothership. The only thing that changes is the cultural label you slap on it. The punchline is, he didn't discover this entity. He inherited the label. It just came with his cultural zip code. Okay, so if it's not some supernatural entity, then what in the world is causing this feeling of peace? Let's flip the script. We've taken apart the myth. Now let's build the scientific case for what's really going on here. Okay, take a look at this graph. This is something psychologists call the U-curve of happiness, and it's a super well-documented phenomenon. Generally, life satisfaction dips in our stressful middle years and then starts to naturally climb back up around age 50. And look where Huberman is. He's approaching 50, and what do you know? He's feeling this sense of peace right on schedule. The argument is that he's taking a totally natural and predictable part of the biology of aging and spiritualizing it. And there are totally concrete, non-mystical reasons for this. It's not magic, it's biology. For one, hormonally, as men age, lower testosterone can lead to less agitation. Second, neurologically, the prefrontal cortex, that's the part of your brain that's always striving, always pushing, it starts to quiet down a bit. And third, just look at his life. He's got financial security, he's got tenure. That removes a huge amount of chronic stress. You put those three things together, and you have a powerful recipe for peace. No entity required. So what we're seeing is that Huberman hasn't stumbled upon some unique secret cure. He's just found a universal human coping mechanism that happens to come with some very old branding. It doesn't matter if you call it give it to God, or the Stoic amor fati, or even the corporate speak of delegate the task. You're doing the exact same thing, cognitive offloading. You're getting a problem off your mental plate. It's a powerful tool, a God hack, you could say, but it's not exclusive to any one belief system. Okay, but here's where we have to get serious for a minute. You might be thinking, so what? If it helps him, who cares what he calls it? Well, this is where that comfort can slide into something much more dangerous: negligence. We have to look at the potential downsides of just praising this feeling of surrender without looking at the side effects. And this slide lays out a really stark and frankly challenging analogy. Imagine you're on a train platform and a child falls onto the tracks. Path 1 is responsibility. Your anxiety skyrockets, that feeling drives you to act, and you save the child. Path 2 is surrender. You give it to God, you feel a wave of calm, this inner peace, and the child dies. The takeaway here is brutal, but it's crystal clear. Surrender might feel good to you, but it's not always the right move. Sometimes that anxiety is the correct biological signal screaming at you to do something. And let's be clear, this isn't just some abstract thought experiment. This exact pattern plays out in the real world with devastating consequences. It's the logic that leads to choosing faith healing over actual medicine. It's offering thoughts and prayers instead of fighting for real policy change after a tragedy. It's accepting environmental collapse because the end times are coming anyway. And that's the bottom line, isn't it? Feeling better yourself doesn't mean you did better for the world around you. All right, let's pull all these threads together. Time for the final verdict on this ghost in the machine that Huberman thinks he's found. So here it is, the final verdict. 1. The peace Huberman feels is real. It's a neural mechanism, cognitive offloading, amped up by the natural biology of aging. 2. The entity is cultural. It's a myth he inherited from a tiny snapshot of history. It's the user interface, not the operating system. And 3. The advice to just surrender is flawed. Without a critical eye, it can lead to serious moral problems. The big thought here is that we can absolutely use the psychology, the code, without buying into the old mythology, the icon. Bottom line, you don't need a ghost to explain the machine. And so this whole thing leaves us with one big question to chew on. This psychological tool of letting go is obviously powerful, and the relief it brings is real. But the real question for us is, can we be smart enough to separate a useful psychological tool from the ancient and, let's face it, often problematic stories it's wrapped up in? That's the real challenge.